Namaste. Hi, I'm Bruce Benefiel, and welcome to One World. Welcome to One World. Namaste is a Sanskrit word which is one of the most ancient languages on the earth, and it simply means God in me recognizes God in you. Something that we can all take into consideration when walking down the street or driving our cars and looking around and seeing all the people around us. We all have that essence within us. This week's guests are Ann Allen, who's the Executive Director for the World Affairs Council of Arizona, and Ferd Haverly, who's the Director for the Central American Bureau for Information and Outreach, and also the President of Valley Community Access Television. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks. Thank you.
And what got you started with what you're doing with the World Affairs Council? I know that essentially is helping to network foreign dignitaries that come into the state, and you set up business meetings and luncheons and events and things like that with them. What got you started in that?
Well, first of all, what we do is we help build relationships. I'm very opposed to the word networking because it's so used nowadays. So I think that what we do is we try to form relationships with people from this country and people from abroad. And honestly, what started me in this was, I think when I was 14 years old, long before I ever knew about the World Affairs Council, I was raised in an all-girl school. And I looked around one day and I thought, this isn't where I belong, because the rest of the world isn't all girl schools in uniforms. And I was also raised in a middle-class area. So I made the decision at that age to go to a school that had people from all ethnic backgrounds. And for those of you who've been around Arizona, you know it was Phoenix Union High School. And my parents were appalled that I would think to go to a school with so many different kinds of kids going there. And I think at that point in my life, I realized that the world was made up with all these different types of people, and I searched for approximately 25 years after that for a job that would allow me the same exposure and experience with the rest of the world.
And also it's made up of those that are appalled that we are doing that.
That's true.
That's
really
what we're
is.
trying to overcome.
Yes.
Or at least attempting to. Trying indicates that you're putting it out there and never accomplishing it. Ferd, how about you? You know, you're involved with two different things that I'm aware of, and probably much more knowing you. The Central American Bureau for Information and Outreach. What got you started with that, first of all?
A woman spoke at my church in late '83, early '84, Sister Darlene Nagorski. She was telling us about Central Americans arriving in Phoenix, and she was looking for people who would receive them into their home on a temporary basis. The sanctuary movement was just beginning then, and she was trying to help people understand the plight of Central Americans. And I knew nothing about Central America. I knew nothing. I didn't have any interest in the political situation there at all. I knew I wanted to learn Spanish, and I saw it as a good opportunity to learn Spanish.
Sure.
So a guy named Luis Alvarado from El Salvador came and lived with my family. He was there 3.5, 4 months, and he changed my life. He told me about his family in El Salvador. He told me the situation of his people and how our government was impacting the lives of the people in El Salvador. So that's what got...
Constructively or
Well, it's... There's a long history of U.S. involvement, and not very much of it is constructive in terms of the lives of the ordinary people of El Salvador. That's
people.
right.
Okay.
The early 80s and throughout the decade, it's just been tragic for El Salvador. 70,000 people have died. 500,000 are displaced. There's 500,000 Salvadoran refugees in the United States now. In the early 80s, the U.S. government was routinely taking any Salvadorans and when they were caught, putting them on a plane and sending them back to the situations they were fleeing.
Kind of like the refugee situation in Florida that's happening.
in direct violation of not only any generally held moral or ethical principles, but in violation of international law and domestic law. And churches starting in Phoenix took action with respect to these. And I didn't care about any of that initially. I just wanted to learn Spanish. But meeting that one person, hearing their story, and having them touch me,
bond.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what put me on a road that's really been much of my life for the last 6-7 years.
So often we're ignorant to things, and because of that are complacent, I think, in world affairs. Now, how about VCAT? That's something that you're also very active in. What got you started?
I've been director of Cambio since 85 now. After the sanctuary indictments where people across Arizona were accused of committing felonies from helping these Central Americans, they weren't doing that. They were following the law and continue to follow the law. But between then and from 85 to 90, and I'm still doing it, I do lots of work with the media, trying to get people to understand this issue. Not just the issue of refugees, but the issue of Central America in general and the impact of U.S. policy on the lives of the Central Americans. What are the conditions bringing the Central Americans here to begin with? What can we do to change that? And I'm convinced if people heard the story, people are good, people would want to take actions which wouldn't cause the damage that our policies were causing and are causing. So to me, it became a media issue. It became a media issue. If people heard the stories that I heard from the Central Americans, if people went to Nicaragua and saw the effect of the war that we sponsored against that country on the common people, if people could be touched the way I was touched, then there wouldn't be the problem. They'd take actions to stop it. I found out that there's a vehicle called public access television. I mean, if you try to work if you try to work with the media in Phoenix, you find out the hardest nut to crack is the Republican Gazette newspapers. It is the body which really, I think, controls a lot of the public perceptions on public issues. They're incredibly powerful. The TV stations spend most of their time doing fluff stories. You can't depend on them to really help explain and involve people in an issue. Good example is this Ron Kovic before the Iraq War. Ron Kovic did a 15-second ad that local people tried to buy ad time on local TV stations, and they were
disallowed.
They were denied even buying the time.
Now, and with what you're doing, as far as integrating the foreign dignitaries into our community, what kinds of fears or barriers have you run up against in doing that?
Okay, from a personal standpoint, are you speaking from personally?
From both, from what's going on inside of you and also what's going on outside of you.
Okay, well, one of the first things that has happened with me is that I realize that the people that we are inviting to visit America, and Arizona in particular, to learn something to take back to their country, that their whole itinerary, their whole agenda is dependent on what I decide that they're going to do. And that's a tremendous amount of responsibility.
Right.
I seriously have prayed for guidance on this, because in the very beginning, the first call that I got when I had started my job 2 years ago, they asked if this visitor could meet with the governor. And I've lived here all my life, and I've never yet called up the governor and said, this was when Mofford was governor, said, would you like to meet with someone? And I'll tell you, it was a very nervous situation, but the second voice on the phone after I made my phone call was Governor Mofford. And I realized at that point that what I was doing was very important.
Do you find that when you're looking to bring other people in, it's easier to call or to do work in their stead as opposed to things that you yourself want to do for yourself?
Okay, when I'm calling...
In other words, it's easier to market someone else rather than yourself.
Oh, definitely. It's easier to market something that you believe in even if you are part of that. But it is, yes, it is. It's much easier. You're right. I see what you're saying.
I'm using market
Yes.
in a broad sense.
It is easier for me to call and do anything for my international visitors than it would have been in the past for myself. Now I know that I'm a part of an important movement, something that is definitely making a difference. Hopefully, I feel for the very best. So it's easier for me to, in a sense, market what I do and market my organization because of it.
Well, I think what you're doing is very valid. That's one of the reasons you're here. And like Ferd, you know, the public access station is very much a viable tool, and hopefully that will increase because the exposure of it has really been something, you know, less than good. I'll put it that way. Now, Ferd, in your putting this information out, what kinds of fears, what kinds of things have you run into on a personal level that you've had difficulty with or had to overcome? And how did you overcome them?
There's on 4 different levels of barriers. I mean, on a personal level, the biggest barrier is understanding that the work I'm doing, which I don't make much money at all, is probably as important as knowing in my heart, which I do know now. It's as important as any other work I could be doing at this point in my life. It's something I really feel called to do. And when I approach it, when I get in situations that are difficult, which demand a lot of personal strength, I think I need that foundation, because when you're confronting, in many ways we are with this effort to really build public access here, confronting institutions which are extremely powerful, extremely able to control the factors, the dynamics of the issue through their influence, then a lot of personal strength is necessary to deal with that.
You mentioned the Republican Gazette for one. You know, the Sunday supplement for TV. All it has, the only thing in there for public access is just says local, and it has the station number. Even in the list of the channels and the pay-per-view and the cable channels, there's no mention of it whatsoever.
People have to believe in the value of this. This is real democracy. This is what our forefathers were talking about when they say the people can get their issues, their ideas out into the marketplace of ideas.
Right.
In the 90s, between 5 and 10 corporations will control all print and broadcast media.
They already do.
We have to work to strengthen this.
Right, and it takes numbers, and it takes getting things out. You know, people traditionally have, if they're not aware, they don't know how to get involved. Making them aware takes advertising, takes phone calls, takes other methods of getting the word out, which basically boils down to numbers of people. And that, as much as we would like to say it doesn't, costs money.
And it's a political question. It's building the political base that says to the politicians, we want this and we want you to support it. Politicians aren't crazy about this. This is in some ways a real threat, that people will have real free speech, that will be able to publicly have some impact around issues that they may be on the other side of.
Right, which is in that common human experience that we all share. How do you see what you're doing and in relationship to a local experience or the common human experience around you? And then how do you see that in relation to a larger multicultural experience that you deal with daily?
Okay, I think that what we do here locally as an organization, as a volunteer organization, that what we do sets an example for not only people in other countries, but also for the community, to let people know that we're involved with something to help people from other countries. We're trying to get it to become more visible in the community, but I think that what we're trying to do is to promote. It's like a mushroom. You start with just a little tiny thing, like a little nucleus, and it'll just keep blossoming out. You're talking about the freedom of the press and those types of things that we have. You know, we're Americans and we have the right to have freedom of the press. We have the right to sit here in front of cameras and say whatever we feel or think. I took those things for granted. I took them very much for granted. I realized that there's a lot of politics and a lot of things, but we still have many more rights than other people do in other countries. And on a day-to-day basis, I am learning what other countries are striving to do that I just assumed have always been that way for everyone. I lived in an idealistic world, in a sense, and I'm becoming more realistic. I think our government is becoming more realistic, but I think it's the citizens within the community. It's the you and the them that are going to make the difference, and showing what a citizen can do to make a difference in the world. I really do.
I find it strange, at best, that so much of these efforts that are so integral and necessary to our future are mostly done with little or no money and almost total volunteer effort.
And you know, that's unique to this country. Volunteerism is an American thing. We're trying to spread the word that it works in other countries, and it will work eventually, and I hope that we see it in our lifetime. But money is the motivation in many, many things. I think that we're getting back to the basics in this country. I think if every individual does their little part, that we're going to get away from the money motivation. At least, I think that's my dream.
Those things have to be covered somewhere along the line.
They do.
Our ability to sit here and talk now,
It costs money.
and the viewers to witness this, costs money, and it has to come from somewhere. Right now it's coming from the franchise fees that Dimension pays to the city. Those costs are being covered. Those costs may not be, the money that's coming from that avenue may not be being used to the best of our or the larger network's ability. For lack of involvement, I think it is probably the best thing, which is, again, due to not knowing that it's there.
I'd like to stick in a point. One of the best ways a person can volunteer in this society, in this community, is to get involved with issues. And to pretend that this is, I know you know it's not ideal, but there's many ways that you can get in the nuts and bolts to construct real democracy here, to construct a really humane society which doesn't leave out the number of people that are left out by this society for basic health care. You know, there's so many issues in Arizona that need work. We're lowest on just about in aid to help mentally ill people.
Right.
We're the highest in teenage suicides. There's
Our educational system is one of the lowest funded.
tremendous work to be done. And I agree with you, you know, we have to work on ourselves to get ready to get out there in society, to develop the confidence and personal strength to do that, and that's very important. But I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture. We have a lot of work to do here.
We've got a tremendous amount of work to do.
And we have to find each other. Like, Bruce, you've helped me find people already, and I'm glad I've run into you. And we have to hold on to each other. We have to let each other know the work we're doing. And we have to build this real community that we can be proud of. Right now, there's a lot not to be proud of in Arizona. And we have to face those facts and build.
Right.
And public access, I really think, you know, I'm not saying to stage public access is the answer, but be a tremendous tool.
It's one of them.
It's one tool that's not underutilized. It'd be tremendous for us to help build real community here and build more justice.
My hopes and aspirations in starting the show was to show that there are those people who do connect with each other, whether it's from a heart level or from an intellectual level. Needless to say, at some level of community service or of putting themselves in a place where they can do the best good for the most people, putting their own minds, bodies, and spirits to the highest and best use of their ability.
It could be a cultural process, too. I don't think we all have to go out and, you know, whip ourselves to death how bad the things are and how
not at all.
And how hard and terrible things are. It can be a positive process where in multidimensional, involving cultural things, involving interpersonal things which make the work worth doing.
Right.
Finding the support, enriching our lives. but always having to focus more than the individualism that we're taught on a day-to-day basis here, that it's just ourselves that we need to protect and grow. It's more than ourselves. It's the community we're part of.
Right. And not necessarily to focus on the things that are wrong with it.
No.
Because we focus our attention there, they're only going to get worse. Because we're putting our attention on it. Where your attention is, all your
Right.
energy goes. That's fine. It's okay that those things are the way they are now. It's also okay to take your focus away from that and look at ways of creating different things or of changing the systems that are in existence. I don't think we're going to have much luck creating entire new systems, from what I've witnessed.
But you
However, we
have to-
can work within the ones that already exist to change.
And keep them honest. The systems are fine, but the actions they're
They're only as good as
taking,
the people in them.
but they should reflect the principles that we've talked about all along, like democracy
Right.
and like pluralism. I mean, we have a Senate, a Congress dominated by white, rich men. I mean, it's ridiculous, the people representing this country. The way that's set up is we have the moneyed and powerful class making all of the decisions for the rest of us. I mean, the representatives of this state don't represent me. They all make too much money. They all are tied into interests that have nothing to do with my life. I mean, we have to really work for democracy.
How do you see that affecting what you do, Ann?
Well, I'm thinking in terms of we elect those officials. I mean, whether we elect those officials. I'm going to just get back to what he has to say. I think it's
With
up
a
to each.
38% voter turnout?
That's right. And we've become an apathetic society. I mean, I really think that the voter thinks their votes don't matter. But to me, they do matter. How this affects me is Arizona has, and I don't think we're here to talk about Arizona, which way it has to go, but Arizona has a long way to go. We're still in the adolescent stage of our growth.
Right.
We just became a state in the beginning of this century. So I think that we're experiencing a lot of things that other states experienced long before the press was involved.
And hopefully we have learned from their mistakes
I
and
think
won't
we
repeat
have.
them.
I think we have. You know, to take some bad press that we have, we've had some issues like the Martin Luther King Day, some of the ASCAM, has really caused an embarrassment to the state. Well, in my opinion,
That could be an asset.
it has become an asset. We have invited people from other countries to come here and learn, and I want to say learn from our mistakes. They have come in here, I think I had 45 people during February that was their major issue was, and they were from African countries, and it was interesting to see what they were told about the Martin Luther King issue. The Martin Luther King issue was a state holiday issue. It wasn't that we were anti-Martin Luther King, but as press went on, that's the way it was interpreted.
Right.
And to turn that around, to show them that this really, no, it's not good that we, whatever your feelings are about that, but in any case, it's working to let them know that there is a chance to turn it around, that the voters can turn it around. Or maybe the voters voted for that, but the voters had the right to vote however they wanted to.
Yeah, I think I really agree with you. It's exciting to be in this state because so much of it is just forming now. We're building the institutions that have been in other states for a long time. And so we have a chance, all of us, to have an impact on what's going to happen here. I think that Martin Luther King reflected, I see it as a media issue. I think that the populist, Evan Meacham, is a populist. That whether you like him or not, he appeals to the people who have felt left out, who feels the Republican Gazette and the senators and the political power structure represents an institutional base which doesn't reflect the will of the people. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Right.
I think
What's your best advice to our audience of how to change the things in their own lives
in their own lives.
and benefit?
I think my life
Overall.
didn't start making sense until I got lots of loops inside myself in terms of meaning and hope and where things are going. As soon as I involved myself in the community at large, and lost myself a little bit in that process, but found myself at the same time.
Sounds like a biblical statement there.
It's really true.
But it works.
I think if lots of people in Arizona feel lost, lots of them came from other places, and they had a lot of their anchors cut away from them. And I'm saying one way to start making more sense of what's going on around you is involving yourself with the community, putting a block watch together on your block. I mean, that could be a transforming experience for someone.
Or even putting on a block party,
A block
for that
party.
matter.
That sounds good.
Just end the isolation. You know,
Yeah.
break down the brick walls we're putting around ourselves and build the community we could have here. And don't make it left-wing, right-wing, ideological like that. Just people coming together to make a better world.
We are one.
Yeah.
And what kind of advice can you give to our audience?
I would say that each one of you can make a difference in this world. You have to be a person who speaks up for what you feel and think. I personally believe that if you let your heart guide you, that you'll be okay. Sometimes we let our head overrule our heart, and that isn't, I don't think that's where it comes from. I think it comes from within. And I also believe that you should go back to the basics that you learned in kindergarten. You know, be kind to one another. All the things you learned when you were 6 years old, if you apply those, you'll make a better family unit, you'll make a better community, and you'll
Some
make
of
a
us
better
didn't
world in the
learn
long
those
run.
things as children.
Really? It's just inside you, I would think. You taught your parents?
We know right and wrong, I think, inside
Mhm.
of us. But we're not always in a place where we can learn that.
Okay. You learn patience, you learn respect,
Right.
just all the basics. And you know, even if you don't learn them, I think you feel them.
Sure. You know what's right and wrong. Ann, Ferd, it's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure the audience has enjoyed it even if they've enjoyed it half as much as I have. That's something, because I really
Thanks, Bruce.
we've hit on some key issues. And thank you all for watching. Please drop us a line. Let us know what your feelings are, how you think about what you see here. Let us know that you're even watching. And write us care of One World, P.O. Box 32035, Phoenix, Arizona 85064. And please let us know what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and what we can do, the people we can get on the show that'll meet your needs or maybe show you something that is common within your experience. Namaste.